Hey everyone, this is Luke again, and welcome back to yet another Ninjago video onto the channel today. So now today's video is going to be, um, talking about the TTV interview that Tommy Andreasen did for, like, his last go-around, his last spin with Ninjago, and, sorry for not posting a video on Wednesday. There was just a lot of issues and drama going on, and I just did not want to make videos. And when I was that way, it was not in my priority. But now, since a few days have passed since then, I have time to make it. So I'm only gonna go over the gist of what happened during the interview. If you already know what happened, so yeah, this video doesn't really need to exist. But if you don't, I'm only gonna be covering like some of the good stuff, like show related, because I am a show guy. So I may cover a little bit of set stuff if it relates to the show, but for the most part, I'm gonna try and keep it. Gonna try and keep it short. Also, this document is credited to Duck Bricks. You know him; he's very famous in the Lego community, and he made a doc about it. And so shout out to him. So Season 11 to Season 15 is the Elemental Saga. They go through each of the ninja and their elements and end up with Golden Power, which was Lloyd. Although that didn't really happen all that much, if I'm being honest. Then there's some set information. Up to LEGO designers and marketers who come up with a focused character and a rudimentary story. Starts with designer concepts, then it goes to the writers, and then back and forth, back and forth. There is sometimes a struggle. Sometimes things are not exactly perfectly aligned. The biggest example is the Geckos and Munts from Master of the Mountain, which they were marketed as villains when they really weren't. And Tommy also said sets are a double-edged sword. They provide kids toys to play with early, but it would be nice to hold more things back show-wise. As time goes on, there is a bigger burden on storytelling as more restrictions come into play and kids don't really care about spoilers. I hate to agree with him, but that's true. You know, they don't really care. They just want to watch a show for the sake of it, you know? Everything discussed by Tommy isn't official canon, and he doesn't have the authority to do that. The show and canon books give you the truth. He will give a ton of answers, but they should be considered could be canon. These were the thoughts that shaped decisions, but not the overall canon itself. So they're more like recommendations, but they aren't like what actually happened. He also will give some ideas of Wu Garmadon's aging and who their parents are. Tommy will still be working at LEGO despite leaving Ninjago. The two reasons he is leaving is, one, he is working on a rather big project, a new show for LEGO development that's been in development for a few years, and he wanted a chance for others to lead Ninjago and conclude this era of the story. So that kind of like explains a big aspect of why he left, because he's working on something else and he just wanted someone else to take the reins, which understandable. Now we're going to talk about, he talked about Crystallized. And this is Vengestone, Overlord, returning characters, etc. The overall goal of Crystallized, in his opinion, was to get to the point where they are back to a healthy status quo. If this was the last time these characters appeared, it would be good. This I don't understand. I don't understand the need for returning back to the status quo. To me, that just reverses development. I understand if this would have happened in something like Season 1 or something, but we are in Season 15. We don't need a status quo change. We don't need to go back to the status quo. We need to progress beyond that. So I don't understand that reasoning. The usage of Inner Steel in the finale. Brady wanted to do the overture. Tommy liked the song and felt like it had something to say. He discussed it with Jay Vincent and Michael Kramer. They liked the idea of the song tying up the season to make it different from what they usually do. And it also was Tommy's choice to put it on the credits. So the reason why Inner Steel was playing in the finale was Tommy. It was Tommy's decision because he felt that the song, for some reason, it spoke it kind of tied the whole thing back. I don't get his reasoning there, but I'm glad Brady wanted to do the overture, because at least he acknowledges the history of that theme. Crystals, no, this is the Overlord, by the way. Overlord next. Crystals have no explanation lore-wise. They had to come up with a cool look for the Overlord faction for this season, and decided it looked cool between them and designers. Brady came up with the idea that it's how to bring Harumi back. However, that doesn't mean there isn't/can't be a lore reason. So you're basically saying they have no explanation, but that doesn't mean there can't be a reason. Which, that's kind of confusing, considering you literally just said they don't have any explanation lore-wise, but it's like you kind of have to explain it. So, I don't know. There's two conflicting messages right there. They touched upon it a bit in Seabound. Tommy always thought Ninjago was created by the first Ninjago Master, but they changed it in Seabound. There was always a myth behind the myth of the Overlord. How did he come to this world? Tommy's original thought, he wonders if the battle between the first Ninjago Master and the Overlord ever actually happened. Maybe the Overlord is the Oni side of the first Ninjago Master. He was trying to get rid of his dark side. That's the line behind the Overlord saying Garmadon's powers were a gift from him. Overlord seeped into the land, and maybe Vengestone, maybe Dark Matter was a part of this. Overlord is the Oni side of the first Ninjago Master, so how does the Stone Army make sense? It's unclear. This is just Tommy's personal idea. That wasn't the thought at the time, but an idea that developed over time. The first Ninjago Master created 1,000 statues of clay that he imbued with the Oni form of himself, and destroyed each of them one by one. But in that process, the Stone Army hardened into indestructible material, and the first Ninjago Master accidentally unleashed the evil part of himself. The entire land is saturated by the Overlord spread to devour, which then bites Garmadon. Okay, so at least that explains, the whole Overlord corrupting the Great Devourer. So this is kind of like a play on the whole first Ninjago Master being the true villain. Because I remember that was raised up for like a final season, and honestly, that's actually a pretty cool idea to say that the Overlord is just the Oni side of the first Ninjago Master that kind of went rogue. The first Ninjago Master realized he was too powerful, so he split his powers into Elemental Masters and created Wumi Garmadon as his final part of the power, giving up his ultimate power. No mother involved, they were his ultimate creation. So that basically confirms that, unfortunately, Wumi Garmadon do not have a mother. She just doesn't exist. They were just created for the sake of creations. Oni warlords come after the first issue master before the split. Very soon after he left the first round, they tracked it down. Mistaki turns on them then. And then he talked about the destruction of the Oni Temple and said there could be balance and peace as a result, and there would likely be consequences, but it doesn't really matter as it's up to 2023 writers. Trying to think. What else? The first Ninjago Master picked the dragon side, didn't invest himself in the conflict of the first round too deeply, and left, followed by the Oni. Got rid of his Oni side, and G/W, I don't know what that means, were all dragon. Garmadon and Wu, I think, were all dragon. But then Garm got bit, so he became part Oni. Oni side was unlocked. Lloyd is a mix of dragon, Oni, and human. So that basically confirms that Garmadon was never a bad person, because I don't like how in Hunted they always implied that he was always bad, when that clearly is not the case. So basically he got corrupted, which affirms what Season 1 said. It corrupted his brother's heart. So Ninjago probably loses 30% of kids each year. There's always something new, and every new season has to bring something new for kids to continue staying alive and keep things fresh. So that may explain why a lot of changes are happening, because kids nowadays have really short attention spans, which I don't blame them. But at the same time, it does feel kind of jarring, especially to OG fans who have stuck around from the very beginning. Now this is the Vengestone buyer. Um, when they came up with this idea of Shintaro, it was put to the ninja in a situation where they had their backs against the wall in the mountain of Vengestone. The perfect society was driven by people in minds. Idea naturally led to a buyer, and they didn't have any particular idea as to who it was, just a seed planted for the future. That kind of makes me realize that I'm probably going to make a video talk about how I don't think the storyline was ever supposed to happen. It just kind of happened and nothing else. So that kind of confirms it. They knew that they had a golden four-headed dragon, and they had to focus on Lloyd. Had to be Overlord and Garmadon, and Bragi came up with 5 different ideas for the buyer. Harumi was one of them, which made fantasy sense, which I don't even know what that means. They went through everyone. Did you? The old idea Tommy had was Pythor had always been there, just invisible. Took that idea, but used it on Harumi instead. Honestly, Pythor would have made way more sense than Harumi, if I'm being honest. Considering Pythor has done stuff like this before, whereas Harumi was just dead the entire time, so it wouldn't make sense for her to be the buyer. Designers at Billion said Nia had to come back. Why? Original pitch was that Nia was out to sea, but forgotten who she was, and became this force of nature, generating a great vortex in the middle of the ocean that drew Ninjago and the Dark Island back together. The 2 temples bringing together dark matter coming from Dark Island to Ninjago, but they wanted to give Nia the agency to bring herself back. Perhaps a bad guy was gathering Vengestone, dumping it into the sea to mess with Nia's mind, which was one idea. They knew that some toys already, but had to fit some logic into it. Crystallize is basically structured like Return of the Jedi. Which, honestly, I don't think that was necessarily the best move. I mean, regardless of how you feel about, the whole Star Wars thing, I just don't think it should have been structured that way. Harumi. How did Tommy see the character of Harumi and by where she ended up? By interacting with fans over the years, they've been very aware of how polarizing Harumi is. Some love her, some don't. Online, Tommy had been adamant that she's dead. Bragi came up with the idea that she was still alive. Harumi died and was brought back by the Overlord, who has this power. It's fantasy, don't question it. We always gotta question it, Tommy. They were going back and forth on this. Final conclusion was they just should leave it up for people to decide. The infamous leave it up to interpretation bullshit. Similar to the ninjas' ages. We need to know their ages. Is she redeemed? Is she not redeemed? Her actions do not redeem her from what she did in Tommy's mind. Same as they did with Ronan at the end of Seabound. They're next to the Commissioner. Audiences could read the character they love or hate however they choose. In this case, Tommy felt it was more important to leave it up to the individual. Tommy's POV is that Harumi isn't easily redeemable. In the book, she meets Garmadon for the first time as he is pardoned by the Emperor. Tommy does not believe that would ever happen to Harumi. She's done worse things. Okay, this is where I'm gonna get really confused. So, you're basically saying she's not redeemable, but yet you wrote a redemption for her? I don't know. What happened with the generals. Tommy was surprised people asked him. To him, it was fairly obvious. They are incapacitated and hugely outnumbered. They clearly went up to Jit and were imprisoned in Cryptaria. Mr. F's fate is up to interpretation. Again with that? Come on. Not every character they had brung in has a backstory. He was a robot Harumi had, so that kind of confirms he was not Echo Zane. And now there's a new version, remake from parts of another iteration of the same blueprint. It doesn't matter. They come with new stories every once in a while, and it doesn't make it onto the screen. The original idea was that Jay went back to hang out with Echo Zane and inspires Echo Zane to become a ninja and be a hero. The small tidbit here, idea was Lighthouse would be filled out of birdhouses based on an interaction Tommy had with Michael Adamthwaite on Twitter about Jay making birdhouses. That would be kind of funny. And then there's the characters endings. Tommy liked the whole Lloyd and Garmadon relationship. The theme of Crystallize was about coming together. had to be more about Ninjago as a whole rather than individual arcs. Worked in small character arcs, Skylar and Kai, Jay and Nia, etc. Proper, obviously, if Quanish comes in, it's everything coming together. Sometimes there's practicalities with budget. Interestingly, 3D assets erode over time. Elemental Master assets are not 3D models they have access to anymore. Each of them comes with a hefty sound effects budget. You want to see them fight, say something? They were all Wilfilm assets and they would have to be recreated basically from scratch. They ran out of budget to include them. Surprisingly, a large amount of budget goes to the voice acting. If they get a voice actor, they may as well have them talk for the entire episode because it's too expensive. As soon as a named character speaks, the price goes up, the cost goes up. So that basically explains why the Elemental Masters were not shown up, because they basically ran out of budget. Tommy has two things he would want to change about Crystallize. He has always wanted to do Zane's PTSD story about the Ice Emperor. He hopes it'll happen one day, but they are making a kid show and they had to do the goofy version of it. Why did you have to do the goofy version of it? Why? I don't understand that. Just because it's a kid show doesn't mean you can't explore those types of themes. Tommy is a storyteller, but he is a producer of Ninjago. He may pitch an idea a few times, but will never force a writer to do something they don't want to do. General consensus in writers' room was more fun was needed, hence why it didn't happen. More fun, my ass. The writers need to understand that your number one priority is telling a great story. It's not about having fun. I mean, having fun with telling a good story, that's awesome. But if you're just having fun with it, but at the expense of a good story, that's just stupid. That is honest to God stupid. And I understand that, like Tommy said earlier, there may be restrictions and whatnot. I get it. But at the same time, you shouldn't let that handicap you from telling a good story. And I think that's what this is saying to me, at least. Tommy loved the idea about Garmadon pushing Lloyd into an Oni thing. He wanted Lloyd to beat the Overlord for a minute and a half, and not for 10 seconds, until seeing his reflection. But they had to balance their chips between either putting more emphasis on the dragon or the Oni form. They come up with a master plan and chop up bits at a time. It's very few instances they could go back and cut stuff because the train has left the station. Okay, I don't understand this explanation, except for this. So they're basically saying they wanted to explore more of it, but they just didn't have enough time. To me, that just proves that the 11-minute format right now is not working, and it needs to either be changed dramatically or straight up retired. One scenario had Lloyd destroy the Overlord and decimate him after the death of Garmadon. He's so angry that he's lost in his Oni form, and he takes the throne. This is shown in the sets. The realm starts falling apart, the balance is completely torn apart, the Nia comes out of the ocean, and they have a huge fight. And it's up for the ninja to fight Lloyd and bring him back. Then you have the same ending. There were scenarios where Garmadon died as well, but they just decided to make it nice and tidy. Again, this kind of goes back. I get that they wanted to be more kid-friendly, but at the same time, it's like, by doing that, you're making the story worse. I don't know. Note on corrections. Princess Vanya versus Queen. Tommy simply forgot / didn't catch it. Things happen. Garmadon said she was resurrected from the curse drum, etc. There's a fantasy explanation out there that makes sense. No, there isn't. At least you admitted that you screwed up. Okay, so then Tommy goes on to explain, he wished he never picked up on the rat. Maybe an animator at Wildbrain put it in because they like Hunted. It could be Mistake. I don't know. It's up for later reveal, or fan interpretation. The original idea in Hunted, as the ninja traveled back through the realm, Mistake's voice was meant to echo throughout as a suggestion of where people go after death. Wow. And then he explains like the whole timeline of what of what Ninjago is. So basically, Wound Garmadon, he said possibly Wound Garmadon like thousands of years old, and then they start aging in the show because as of the short battle between brothers is when in 10 years of the show starting, but they still look young, so they just rapidly age, I guess. These two guys have been in possession of the golden weapons for years. The weapons of the creation kept them alive, but now old age is rapidly catching up with them. But that doesn't explain how they got old to begin with. Alternatively, since Garmadon went into the overworld and they kept the balance with each other, then they start to age rapidly. Never mind. So basically, the reason they were young is because they were basically within close distance of each other. And now that they were farther away, they just aged like that, basically. Um, then I'm not going to read all of this, but I'll link it. Hopefully, I'll find that. Yeah, I'll link the document of what Duck Bricks has written. Was the usage of the teapot as a background running gag a deliberate choice or just a running gag? First appearance was supposed to be an SOG. It was placed in the water where they go to infiltrate the base. The idea was that the teapot travels the world and ends up in different places, and it became a running production joke. They never really was a plan. Maybe they are having fun with the audience a bit, but they're having fun with it. Naracon was considered for the council, but he has such a weird presence in Ninjago. Only a few characters remember him, some don't. Letting him out in the open opens up such a huge amount of exposition that needs to happen. They did have the ideas that Clutch was about to wish us all away, but he drops the teapot, it breaks, and Naracon is freed. What actually happened is Tommy and Brady jumped Clutch in the warehouse and took it from him. So I guess it'll probably end the whole running gag. So I kind of knew it was a running gag because why would they do that constantly and not do it? I don't know. Then there was an idea. What they did in Legends, they made a conscious decision not to include dragons or snakes, as I was reserved for Ninjago. Same thing for Nexonite, so they don't blend together. Tommy liked the idea the first Bujutsu Master had gone to Chima to populate Ninjago in some way. There's maybe a Chima story where the snakes are becoming a problem, and they are exiled or brought out from the world and sent to Ninjago. When Lloyd fell into Chima in Season 5, the Haywoods proposed, but canonized the connection, which started as a fun little gag. And then there's stuff about the Hydro Whippers, which I don't really want to talk about. When Wu defeated Acronix and Crux, what happened to them? Tommy loves having a dark horse at that any time. These guys can jump out of the sky. They're spiraling through time. Are they caught in the loop? Are they going back? It's unclear. They played with the idea in Golden Legend where you see the Iron Doom in the background as the warrior walks towards the dragon. Maybe that's the result of a timeline getting destroyed because of what happened there. It's sometimes fun to ask questions and not give answers. No, it's not. But that raises, if Wu can escape the timeline, why can't Acronix and Crux? In the final episode of Hands of Time, you would actually have Wu in the past approach his younger self and tell him nobody must ever know what happened here. Make all the elemental masters forget these events. But maybe one master didn't drink it, and there's a story idea from there. Samurai X from Season 7 was Wu from the future. He was traveled back there to help the ninja, was there the entire time. Jay's parents is something they never explored. They know what the status is, but they didn't know what led to it. There is an idea to have Liber as part of Prime Empire, and it is a regret Tommy has. The season should have been electricity based. It could have been important to get him in the game to harness his powers, etc. They had an early scenario where Liber was running from someone because someone was after him because of his powers. The choice she had to make was give up her powers so they would hunt her and not him. They never got to explore it any further as it was too similar to Harry Potter. Yet you structured crystallized after Return of the Jedi? So, I don't know. And also Master of the Mountain was tied to parents as well. Conversation with Jay and Unagami would have tied more into that story. The Ninja's ages. So many people want to identify with him, make it their own, so you won't say it's up to interpretation. The ninja have to stay relatable to kids every year, basically, and they also forgot about the mailman. What are Kaiji Cole's greatest fears? Basically, Cole's fear was that not living up to Lily's final words. Jay losing Nia, and Kai not being liked or included anything related to his family. The possession reflections. Tommy has one really good idea that he wants to be canonized, so he's keeping it for himself. Tommy may still be working with Vincent, new Lego show. So that may explain the tweet of thanks for sticking around for so long. Tommy really wanted to do the Ice Emperor story. He's left behind a few ideas and hopes someone picks them up, whether in a book or other media. Ninjago is so ripe for spin-offs, and he's not working on a main show anymore, but he would be open to do spin-offs. Tommy's Echo Sane spin-off idea could tie here. He had ideas of how Benthamar became king, but there's only so much time. The Garmadon comic, they really did not know where they would go. It crystallized. The shift from 22 minutes to 11 minutes. It was not something anyone really wanted to do. It wasn't a creative decision. It was an external network decision to reinvent the show. At the time, the major input was that the shorter format was taking off, comedy shows in particular. That's why most of them were reluctant to the idea once the decision was made. Why was Data Departed different in Chinese? Cultural reasons you have to be aware of in China. So basically, something about Chinese stuff with, the spirits and the dead. What would Tommy change? He's mostly annoyed by continuity errors, uniform changing, shoulder plates missing. Errors show up in different processes working on it. When you're focused on image versus sound, etc., things change. In terms of story, he's pretty happy with what they got. And Tommy, so he works with companies in Canada, India, production companies in those two countries, writers in the US, designers in Denmark. He's the bottleneck of everything production related to Ninjago. There are a lot of fully fleshed stories sitting in a drawer. An idea never really dies, so you have to be careful with sharing an idea as it can be reborn into a different format, like Pythor being present in past Ninjago scenes and being swapped for Harumi. Have there been anything mandated by LEGO that you didn't want to include? Yes, all the time. Many times they say that on certain toys, kids really want to get their hands on. Tommy understands the value of putting a toy in the show in a relevant way, but he has to really work things into the story. For instance, they had a very hard time fitting Vanya's dragon Chompy into the story. In the story, they made it her dragon. The product is Wu's dragon on its back. So how do they make the scenario happen in the show? Firestone Mech is another example. They really had to stretch it to cover it lava and make it reflect their set better. Is there a moment that could be pinpointed to Ninjago's peak? According to Tommy, it was SFG was a considerable leap forward. The Hagmans were back, it looked better, and it was the result of a collaboration gone wrong behind Wilfilm and a specific vendor at the time. There are explanations as to why Hands of Time wasn't as great as it should have been. Wilfilm had to figure out new ways to do things after that failed vendor collaboration resulted in Hands of Time. In their workshops, they rendered out a house of all people in Ninjago where everyone threw in input, and the Hagmans and Brady were there to tie it all together. All of SOG and Hunting was built in one session. Built off the best parts of the movie and made use of it in the show. What about Ninjago will Tommy miss the most? Ninjago was a chore to work on. He always spent 10% of his brain constantly thinking about what would happen. He will miss the people and the way Ninjago developed. Regardless, Tommy will want to finish his 2 books, Way of the Departed and Splinter the Blind Man's Eye. You will see him pop up in a few instances in the year to come. He is working on some projects which are loosely Ninjago related. It's not the main series. It's something else that's very meta, and people will either love it or be very upset about it. Difference isn't always bad. Always give it a chance. So yeah, that's pretty much the summary of that Q&A with Tommy on the TTV channel. I will also link that video in the description so you can watch it if you have loads of time to kill. But if not, you could just read the entire transcript that Duckbricks made. So again, shout out to him for keeping track of all of that information, because good Lord knows I probably could not keep up with that information. But anyways, what are you guys' thoughts about Tommy's explanations for certain things? Do you think some of them were good, some of them were bad, or kind of a mix in between? Let me know in the comments down below. And sorry if I kind of went through it kind of quickly, so I kind of sound like blah, 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 blah. mostly because there was just a lot to read. So, but anyways, I hope you guys like this video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel by clicking on the red subscribe button, and click on the notification bell to see every video that I will upload. And I'll see all you folks in the next video. Bye bye.